Psychology of the shadow. Within each person, there exists a portion of the unconscious that maintains close proximity to the ego, often assuming the same gender as the dreamer in dreams. This component, known as the shadow, can be likened to an alter ego, a fragment separated from the conscious ego mind and relegated to the depths of the unconscious. Typically, the shadow houses qualities and characteristics, both positive and negative, that naturally belong to the individual's ego personality. However, for various reasons, the ego has either failed to integrate these traits or has actively suppressed them. In some cases, the qualities residing in the shadow may appear embarrassing or primitive to the ego, making it reluctant to acknowledge their presence. Alternatively, the shadow may harbor significant positive strengths that the ego hesitates to embrace, fearing the weight of responsibility or the profound transformation of its limited self-image. The shadow, in analytical psychology, refers to the unconscious aspect of a person's personality that contradicts the ego ideal. It represents elements that the ego finds undesirable and attempts to repress. This repression can lead to a conflict between the ego and the shadow. The shadow is considered the emotional blind spot, representing aspects of the self that the ego resists acknowledging. This unacknowledged content is often projected onto others or externalized as archetypes within the collective unconscious, such as the trickster. In contrast to the persona, the shadow is considered unconscious, encompassing elements of the id and one's personal history that are suppressed under the ego ideal imposed by the superego. The shadow is projected onto one's social environment in the form of cognitive distortions. Additionally, it can be seen as roughly equivalent to the entire Freudian unconscious, with Jung highlighting that Freud's methods leads to a detailed exploration of the shadow side of man, unparalleled in previous ages. The superego is a component of the psyche in Freudian psychoanalytic theory. It represents the internalized moral and societal standards, acting as a conscience to regulate and control behavior. The term id refers to a concept in Freudian psychoanalytic theory. The id is one of the three components of the mind, according to Freud, representing the instinctual and primal aspects of human nature. It encompasses unconscious drives, desires, and impulses operating based on the pleasure principle and seeking immediate gratification. Jung noted that if awareness of the projection of the shadow remains repressed, the shadow archetype can operate autonomously, influencing the id and the ego. This autonomy can lead to the realization of its object or the creation of situations characteristic of its power. These projections act as symbolic barriers between the ego and the ego-less real, insulating and deluding individuals in society. The ego-less real is a concept in analytical psychology that refers to a state of being or experience where the individual transcends or goes beyond the ego, which is the conscious sense of self. In this state, there is a dissolution or temporary suspension of the ego, allowing for a more direct connection with deeper aspects of the psyche or a broader, more fundamental reality. It is a term used to describe moments or experiences where one can move beyond the limitations of the ego and tap into a more expansive and interconnected sense of existence. Shadow, according to Carl Jung. According to Carl Jung, the shadow is a crucial concept in psychology, representing the hidden and often unconscious aspects of an individual's personality. It encompasses the elements of one's psyche that the conscious mind tends to overlook, deny, or suppress. These elements can include repressed desires, fears, instincts, and traits that may be contrary to one's conscious self-image. The shadow is not inherently negative. It contains both positive and negative aspects. The shadow is of paramount importance in Jungian psychology for several reasons. First, it serves as a pathway to self-awareness. By exploring and acknowledging the shadow, individuals gain insight into their own hidden motivations, fears, and desires. This self-awareness is a fundamental step in personal growth and the journey toward individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. Second, the integration of the shadow is essential for psychological balance and wholeness. Jung believed that ignoring or repressing the shadow could lead to imbalances in the psyche, potentially manifesting as erratic behavior, emotional turmoil, or interpersonal conflicts. Integrating the shadow involves accepting these hidden aspects and finding a place for them within one's conscious identity, contributing to a more harmonious and complete personality. Moreover, the shadow plays a significant role in creativity. Jung posited that by embracing and integrating the shadow, individuals can access a wellspring of creative energy and inspiration. The unexplored depths of the psyche, often contained within the shadow, can be a source of innovative ideas and artistic expression. Lastly, recognizing and acknowledging the shadow in oneself can lead to greater compassion and understanding in relationships with others. It fosters empathy by acknowledging that every individual harbors their own shadow, and this recognition can lead to more profound connections and improved interpersonal dynamics. Shadow in dreams. The manifestation of the shadow in a dream is closely tied to the attitude of the ego. For instance, when a person's ego holds a friendly disposition toward their inner shadow and is open to growth and transformation, the shadow often takes on the role of a supportive ally, a trusted friend, a companion on their journey, or a fellow tribe member who aids them in their adventures, provides backup, and imparts valuable skills. Conversely, if the ego's intent is to suppress the shadow, it typically materializes in the dream as a hostile adversary, an aggressor or monstrous figure that engages in confrontations with the dreamer's nocturnal experiences. These principles remain applicable to both men and women, where the shadow may appear as a loving sibling or a fearsome antagonist, contingent upon the individual's relationship with this concealed aspect of themselves. The shadow aspect of the self can manifest in dreams and visions, often taking on various forms and typically appearing as a person of the same sex as the dreamer. The appearance and role of the shadow in these manifestations are heavily influenced by the individual's life experiences, as much of the shadow is developed in the person's mind rather than being solely inherited from the collective unconscious. Encountering and interacting with the shadow in dreams can offer insight into one's mental state. Analyzing such experiences is challenging. Conversations with the shadow may reveal conflicting desires, and identifying with disliked figures may indicate unrecognized differences and a rejection of the superego's desires. According to Jung, the shadow comprises layers. The upper layer involve personal experiences becoming unconscious due to factors like attention shifts, forgetfulness, or repression. These layers reflect individual aspects of the shadow. Beneath them are the archetypes, representing universal elements shared in human experiences. This deeper layer, untouched by personal experiences, operates independently of the conscious mind and embodies archetypal elements inherent to the human psyche, transcending individual variations. An example of a shadow as a positive figure in dreams. In some cases, if a woman has a positive and accepting attitude towards her shadow, it may appear in her dreams as a friendly or helpful feminine figure. This could be symbolized by a supportive friend, a guide, or a nurturing character who assists her in her dreams narrative. This representation suggests a healthy relationship with the shadow, where she embraces its hidden qualities and integrates them into her conscious identity. Shadow as a negative figure in dreams. On the other hand, if a woman has a more conflicted or repressive relationship with her shadow, it may appear in her dreams as a hostile or threatening feminine figure. This could be symbolized by a menacing antagonist, a monster, or a destructive force that challenges her in her dreams. Such dream scenarios often reflect the internal struggle with repressed emotions or unacknowledged traits that need attention and integration. Shadow encounter. Shadow work involves exploring and integrating the shadow, which is part of the unconscious mind. This process is often carried out through active imagination, daydreaming, and meditation. The experiences encountered during this exploration are then mediated through dialectical interpretation using narrative and artistic expressions such as poetry, pottery, drawing, dancing, and singing. Analysts may also perform dream analysis on individuals, analysans, using amplification to bring unconscious elements into conscious awareness. The encounter with the shadow is a crucial aspect of the individuation process, a concept central to Jungian psychology. Jung believed that the journey of individuation follows a certain formal regularity with archetypal symbols marking its stages, and the first stage often leads to an experience of the shadow. The breakdown of the persona, which Jung considered a pivotal moment in therapy and personal development, opens the path to exploring the shadow within. This breakdown can occur when a person feels a deep sense of boredom and meaninglessness, signaling the need for a renewal that involves delving into one's own darkness, the shadow. Jung emphasized that as consciousness gains clarity, there is a risk of becoming too one-sided or monarchic. The ongoing renewal and growth, according to Jung, involve a descent into one's own darkness, encountering the shadow, and allowing for the dissolution of the persona, the social mask one presents to the world. The shadow in Jungian psychology personifies everything that an individual consciously or unconsciously refuses to acknowledge about themselves. It is often described as a tight passage or narrow door, representing a challenging and painful confrontation with aspects of the self that are typically avoided. When an individual attempts to confront their shadow, they become aware and may feel ashamed of qualities and impulses they deny in themselves but can easily recognize in others. These may include traits like egotism, mental laziness, sloppiness, unreal fantasies, schemes, plots, carelessness, cowardice, and an excessive love of money and possessions. The dissolution of the persona, the social mask presented to the world, and the initiation of the individuation process bring with them the danger of falling victim to the shadow. This involves a merger with the black shadow, representing the inferior and hidden aspects of the personality. Jung emphasized the importance of recognizing and integrating the shadow rather than being overwhelmed or consumed by it during the individuation journey. An example of the shadow might involve an individual who consciously identifies as kind, generous, and compassionate, presenting themselves as someone who always helps others and avoids conflict. However, within their shadow, hidden from the conscious awareness, there may be aspects of anger, jealousy, or selfishness that they find uncomfortable or at odds with their self-image. In this scenario, the individual's shadow contains these unacknowledged or repressed emotions and traits. They may have learned in early life that expressing anger or jealousy was unacceptable or led to negative consequences, so they pushed these feelings into their unconscious. As a result, these shadow elements remain hidden but can influence their behavior indirectly. For instance, the person may occasionally feel intense bursts of anger or resentment that seem to arise unexpectedly, leading to outbursts or passive-aggressive behavior. These emotional reactions are manifestations of the shadow material. Until they confront and integrate these hidden aspects, the individual may struggle to achieve true emotional balance and self-awareness. The collective shadow. The concept of the collective unconscious suggests that all of humanity shares certain unconscious ideals. Within this framework, there is a phenomenon known as projective identification, where the collective unconscious projects and identifies with uncertainty and feelings of helplessness, often accompanied by other negative emotions. This projection is frequently associated with the figure of the devil, viewed as the fourth aspect of the Pauline Christian Trinity, serving as a foundational myth. Similar patterns can be observed in other mythologies. For example, in ancient Egyptian mythology, the devil-like figure Set is said to represent overwhelming emotions. The collective shadow, rooted in ancestral experiences, is carried by this collective history of the human race. This includes dynamics such as in-group and out-group relationships, leading to phenomena like dehumanization and hate crimes. In essence, the collective shadow reflects shared negative aspects of the human experience that are embedded in the collective unconscious. Shadow projection. Shadow projection is a psychological phenomenon where individuals unconsciously attribute their unacknowledged or disowned traits, desires, or emotions to other people or external situations. It's a process through which individuals project elements of their own personality, both positive and negative, onto others, often without conscious awareness. This mechanism operates as a defense strategy to protect one's self-concept and ego. When individuals encounter aspects of themselves that they find uncomfortable, unacceptable, or threatening, they may project these qualities onto others, externalizing what they cannot or will not acknowledge within themselves. This projection allows them to distance themselves from these aspects, temporarily relieving their inner conflict or discomfort. Collective shadow projection can have severe and far-reaching consequences for individuals, groups, and societies. Some of the most serious and real dangers associated with collective shadow projection include conflict and division. When a group or society collectively projects its unresolved conflicts, fears, prejudices, or negative traits onto an external other, it can lead to polarization, hostility, and deep divisions within the community. These divisions can escalate onto social or political conflicts, fostering an us versus them mentality. Scapegoating and discrimination. Collective shadow projection often results in scapegoating, where a particular individual, group, or community is unfairly blamed and targeted for problems or challenges. This can lead to discrimination, persecution, and social injustices, as seen in historical examples such as racism, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia. Lack of accountability. When collective shadow projection occurs, there is a tendency to avoid taking responsibility for one's own actions and choices. This can hinder personal and societal growth because individuals and groups may not address their underlying issues and challenges, preventing meaningful change and development. Ineffective decision-making. In politics and governance, collective shadow projection can cloud rational decision-making. Leaders may make choices driven by projected fears or prejudices rather than evidence-based policies, leading to detrimental consequences for society as a whole. Escalation of violence. In extreme cases, collective shadow projection can contribute to violent conflicts, wars, and genocides. When groups project their darkest fears and animosities onto one another, it can fuel a cycle of violence and retaliation with devastating human and social costs. Diminished empathy and understanding. Shadow projection reinforces stereotypes and dehumanizes the other, making it difficult for individuals or groups to empathize with those they perceive as different. This lack of understanding can impede efforts to bridge divides and find peaceful resolutions. Stagnation and regression. Collective shadow projection can hinder societal progress by preventing the acknowledgement of pressing issues and the exploration of constructive solutions. It can lead to stagnation and regression rather than growth and development. Erosion of social fabric. Continual collective shadow projection can erode the social fabric of a community or society, undermining trust, cooperation, and a shared sense of purpose. This erosion can weaken the foundations of a stable and harmonious society. To address the dangers of collective shadow projection, individuals, communities, and societies need to engage in self-awareness, dialogue, and reconciliation processes. Recognizing and integrating projected aspects of the collective shadow is essential for promoting understanding, empathy, and constructive solutions to complex issues. It requires fostering a culture of inclusivity, accountability, and open communication to mitigate the damaging effects of shadow projection on the personal and collective levels. Shadow integration. In the context of the individual, Jung suggests that the problem presented by the shadow is addressed on the plane of the anima, which refers to the inner feminine aspect within a man's psyche, associated with relatedness and deeper connections. Merging, as opposed to integrating, with the shadow is considered negative because it entails the suppressed id, unconscious instinctual desires, taking control of or overpowering the ego. Jung observed that the shadow can dominate a person's actions, especially when the conscious mind is shocked, confused, or indecisive. When someone is possessed by their shadow, they may act counter to their conscious intentions, impeding personal growth and well-being. In Jung's perspective, using the analogy of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he emphasizes that it must be the conscious personality, Jekyll, that integrates the shadow and not the other way around. Allowing the shadow to overpower the conscious mind could result in the conscious self becoming subservient to the autonomous and potentially destructive shadow. As individuation progresses, separating the ego from the collective unconscious, there is a shift in focus. The libido or psychic energy withdraws from the bright upper world of conscious adaptation and delves into the depths of the unconscious, the shadows. This process brings forth what was hidden beneath the mask of conventional adaptation, exposing the shadow. The eventual aim is to unite the ego and shadow in a precarious but transformative unity, fostering a more integrated and authentic sense of self. Confronting the shadow can initially lead to a state of dead balance and standstill that hampers moral decisions and renders convictions ineffective. This phase is often associated with terms like nigredo, chaos, and melancholia, reflecting the challenging and disorienting nature of the encounter with the shadow. Jung described this period of descent as a time of inner turmoil and darkness, lasting for varying durations. During this time, genuine courage and strength are essential for navigating the complexities of the unconscious. Despite the inherent difficulties, Jung maintained the view that every descent is followed by an ascent. He acknowledged the danger associated with the descent into the shadow, but emphasized that it is an integral part of the process. While in the depths, there is a possibility of assimilating the shadow rather than being possessed by it. This suggests that, with courage and perseverance, individuals can emerge from the confrontation with the shadow having integrated and understood previously hidden aspects of themselves. Integration is the process of understanding and incorporating the shadow. This may involve ego adapting to certain aspects of the shadow or simply acknowledging its existence. Enantiodromia is a concept introduced by Carl Jung referring to the tendency of things to transform into their opposites. It suggests that when a force or situation reaches an extreme, it can flip into its opposite. This principle is often applied in psychology to describe how the unconscious compensates for imbalances in the conscious mind. For example, an excessive focus on one aspect of personality might lead to the emergence of its opposite in the unconscious, seeking balance. Integrating the shadow can result in a profound spiritual encounter known as a numinous experience. However, relying solely on this numinous effect without reality testing can lead to issues such as ego inflation or archetypal possession. In other words, becoming excessively attached to the spiritual or profound aspects of the experience without grounding it in reality can cause problems for the individual. The process of healing spirals entails the superego's effort to maintain awareness of the shadow without being overwhelmed by it. Avoiding identification with the shadow requires moral effort to prevent descending into darkness. Understanding serves as a lifesaver, integrating the unconscious and preventing the conscious mind from being overwhelmed. This process incorporates the shadow into the personality, leading to a stronger and broader consciousness. Assimilating the shadow provides a foundation for further individuation, marking the first step in the analytical process. Without this integration, the recognition of anima and animus is considered impossible. As the shadow is recognized and integrated, the focus of individuation shifts to the anima and animus, becoming the center of the quest for self-discovery. Some believe that the shadow, despite its role as a reservoir for human darkness, is also the seat of creativity. For them, the dark side represents the true spirit of life, in contrast to a dry, scholarly approach. However, Jungians caution that acknowledgement of the shadow must be an ongoing process throughout one's life. Even as the focus of individuation shifts, later stages of shadow integration will continue, involving the acceptance of one's shadow, a process often described as washing one's dirty linen in private. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you found your shadow is awesome. Also, go check out my app in the App Store if you want to discover more on how to analyze your dreams and more on Carl Jung's psychology.